Evening, everyone. I'll get the meeting started this evening. First of all, I'll read the land proclamation before we call meeting to order. We are pleased to be here today on traditional territory of Treaty 6 and the Métis homeland. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. We are all treaty people. The peace treaties bind us all. With that, I'll call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. The regular council meeting of the City of Beaumont City Council, Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021 at 6 p.m. At this time, point number 2 is the adoption of the agenda. Administration, are there any changes to the agenda this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. Administration doesn't have any amendments to the agenda this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any change from council on the agenda? Seeing none. Councilor Middle, would you make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
Yes, thank you. I make the motion that the November 23rd, 2021 regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Thank you. Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item is the consent agenda. On the consent agenda is 5A, which is the regular council meeting minutes of November 9th, 2021. Is there a member of council, Councilor Cook, willing to move the consent agenda be adopted as presented?
I move that that council can the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion, council? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Motion is carried 7-0. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is our open forum. And we do have presented this evening on open forum, which I'll get to in just 1 minute. So procedurally, council, with the open forum and to our presenters, I'll have our presenters present their information. Then I'll ask for councilors to have any questions for the presenters on the information they present. And after those questions are over with, any questions council may have, administration will be dealt with in section 8A, which is councilor inquiries. Okay, with that, I'll have our presenters please take the table, please. Introduce yourself in a moment here. Once you get settled in. Yeah. Give me 1 second, Mr. Blade, to make sure I have your microphone on. I think you are. I think I got you there. Hang on a second. That should be you.
Hello.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Blades. You have 5 minutes. Please proceed at your convenience.
Thank you. I do have handouts, if I can do that.
Sure. Can we stop the clock? Do the handouts quickly if we could. Give you your full 5 minutes. And please pull your mic towards your face a little closer when you speak, please. Thank you very much.
Yeah. The handouts essentially are done in a even and odd combination. The key thing of those handouts are there's some photographs, before and after photographs, and then also the one page or the letter that is submitted from the city to residents.
Okay.
Basically, it just gives you a little bit of background.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Your mic's back on, Mr. Blades. Please introduce yourself and we'll begin your presentation. Thank you.
City of Beaumont. Also with me is Donna Mandow. Immediately behind me, also Brenda Gonkwitz, who's a resident adjacent to the sports field.
Okay.
They'll be available to answer any questions that may come forward as well.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I do appreciate this opportunity for us to speak about this particular issue. You probably did receive an email from myself. And running parallel with that email, I'll do a brief introductory and summary rather than trying to do a 15-page discussion. So
Appreciate that.
relatively brief. So we're here essentially with our concern. The sports field, we know that the construction had started the middle of June of this year. And I think recognizing, I don't think anybody has any concerns with the sports field. But we did see September the 20th, a very large 4 towering light standards, very tall, very industrial looking. These are the same type of light standards that you'd see at an overpass. So this is something that we would not typically envision adjacent to a residential development or residential area. So I think seeing the sports field being built, I don't think, we recognize that there's an existing sports field there before, a grass sports field. I don't think that's a big issue. We do know that there's going to be a higher intensity of land use, though, as a result. So in some degrees, we have some concerns. We don't know what the impact is going to be. However, when we saw the very tall 70-foot light standards, we thought, okay, we have a concern now. So, there is a visual impact with these lights. It is a concern when you look at the skyline, very tall, as I mentioned, it's 70 feet. As well, a very large structure. The other thing, we haven't seen the lights on at this moment. We know that they're very engineered properly. I'm very certain, these are types of lights are baffled properly to make sure that, they wouldn't be going into people's windows and so on and so forth. However, we do have a number of adjacent landowners that are very, very close to these light standards. Brenda Gonkwitz has one immediately adjacent to her backyard. I think that I feel bad for her, given the fact that how close this light standard is. There are 4 of them in total. You can see from the photographs that you have are those viewed from Place de Chalarousse subdivision. Brenda, she is in a different subdivision immediately east of the sports field, and that set of lights is very, very close to her residence. Other landowners do have concerns. So I've spoken with other landowners, adjacent landowners, they're concerned as well. There's other people that they're going to wait until they see what happens. A lot of the comments were essentially, well, let's wait and see. But I think we have to be proactive rather than waiting for a year or so and then come with some concerns. I think it's very important to look at it right now to see whether there can be some mitigating things that can be done. So ultimately, our biggest concern is the lights. I would say that if there are some alternatives, we've talked about alternatives. We did with the previous mayor, John Stewart and Martin Stout. He put the item over to the November agenda. My understanding, though, that it was I won't say dropped, but it was something that we had to bring up ourselves. So I think we're probably low on time here, but ultimately our concern is the light standards. The height, if there could be an alternative, portable lights, that would be our preference. Or if this does not be an alternative, then we have to look at other perhaps compensation discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blades, for your presentation. I know 5 minutes goes by very quickly, doesn't it? It goes by very fast. So we gave you a little more time and do appreciate that. At this point, I'll ask council if there are any questions you may have for our presenter regarding the information he's presented to us, either from the email earlier today or from the verbal presentation just given to us.
Mayor, may I add just a few comments to what David had said prior to questions? I think there's some valid information that the council needs to hear.
Actually, I'm afraid I can't allow that. I'm sorry. Our procedural bylaw will not allow additional presentations. I apologize for that. Sorry. Council, if you have no questions at this point, thank you. Mr. Blades, thank you for coming this evening, and our other co-presenters. If council has any questions from administration, they will, as mentioned earlier in this evening, they can offer those questions to administration later on in the 8A section of our agenda called Council Inquiries. Okay. Thank you for your presentation. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening. Thank you for coming. We'll take just a short break before we continue on our agenda. Moving on to 6A, a register presentation is a library presentation, the schematic design. And I believe we have presented, are they coming all by Zoom? I thought we had one coming in person. Has that changed possibly? Administration?
Thank you, Mayor. We do have 3 and they're all coming in through Zoom and we're just going to let them into the meeting now.
Okay, thank you. Council, let's wait a moment while our presenters join us momentarily here. You're welcome to stay if you want. If you want to stay, you can. Otherwise, you're both free to leave if you'd like to. Thank you very much.
I wonder why you can't speak with both landowners here.
My understanding is one item, 5 minutes.
There's different landowners here. Why does that not surprise me?
I'm sorry, folks, for your disconcern, but that's a procedural bylaw. We allow 5 minutes per presentation on a topic. So thank you, administration. Would you want to assist here, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. If if council would like to temporarily suspend the meeting procedural rules, you could pass a motion to allow any of the other landowners to speak for 5 minutes.
We very much appreciate it.
Okay, I stand somewhat corrected then, which is okay. It's always good to make exception when we possibly can.
Thank you, Mayor. You would be temporarily suspending the meeting procedurals bylaw, just so you're aware of that. So I would require a motion.
Okay, so to be clear, a member of council can make that motion. Council then debate that motion, and if the motion passes to suspend our bylaw, we vote accordingly, correct?
Correct, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Is there a member of council willing to make a motion as Ms. Winter outlined a moment ago to suspend our bylaw? Councillor Miller. Oh, I'm sorry. Hit the wrong button. I apologize. Sorry.
Thank you,
Councillor
Mayor.
Barnhart.
Thank you, Mayor. I will make that motion to suspend the procedural bylaw and hear from the residents.
Thank you. So moved. Council, discussion on the motion, please. Seeing none. Okay. I'll call for the question. Thank you, council. That motion is passed unanimously. And on a point of order, I'm going to ask Ms. Winter for clarification. We have suspended our bylaw, as you mentioned a moment ago. The motion's passed. Does that allow us to have one presenter additionally, or both who are in the room with us? And they get 5 minutes each, or they get a lesser amount of time? That part I didn't think to ask before we did the motion. I apologize. So clarifying that, but what is the clarification process now?
Thank you, Mayor. So in your motion, you weren't clear with regards to temporarily suspending the rules to allow both landowners or just one landowner.
Okay. Can I make a judgment call? Do we have to clarify the motion?
You can make a judgment call, Mayor.
Ladies, 2 minutes each, if you don't mind.
Sure, exactly, sure.
If that's convenient, fine. I'm going to give you 2 minutes each individually or 2 minutes together, whichever you prefer to do.
Yeah, 2 minutes each. Go ahead.
Okay.
Or that's fine.
Yes, please join us at the mic. You introduce yourself, if you don't mind, please, for the record. Thank you. And we're very pleased to accommodate your request.
Thank you very much. I
You're very
appreciate
welcome. You have 2 minutes, please, when you have to introduce yourself. Thank
that.
you.
Thank you. My name is Donna Mando, and I'm a resident here in Beaumont, proud resident of Beaumont. I just want to bring to the attention of council that there was no consultation when this sports field was being put together. Numerous conversations were in place from Mr. Blades and from Brenda, looking for understanding of the lights that were installed, looking for understanding. Actually, in the package that Mr. Blades handed out, there is a picture of what the so-called structural plan was going to be. There's no information on that plan, which we only received about a week before the diggers started coming through, that there's light posts. And in speaking with the project manager, she herself didn't understand what the light posts would be, or that there would even be light posts. So I think, just for clarification and for understanding, I think a piece of our frustration and concern, I'll say for myself, I'm not happy that there's a sports field behind my house. There's going to be noise, a lot of people cutting through our area, bringing in people from outside the community. That could create some potential issues, although I'm very proud of Beaumont and how innovative Beaumont really is. But I think there wasn't a lot of thought or consultation, perhaps, to the community in what this was going to be. And so there's now a field there that looks right into my house. And I'm not happy to look at it. I love the lake. I was hoping it was just going to be the lake. But I appreciate you listening, because I just wanted to emphasize that there was no consultation, because I would have been there. Thank you.
I'm Brenda Gonkwitz. I probably am the most affected by these light standards, particularly the one behind my house. There's been a real lack of transparency on this project. When we were contacted, the residents in my cul-de-sac that back onto the east side of the park, we were contacted by a leaflet in our mailbox June or July of 2020, and we were invited to voice our concerns on this upcoming project, which all of us did. And none of us were contacted regarding our concerns. There was just no reply. And personally, because of that, I kind of felt, speaking with the neighbors, I kind of felt that maybe it was stalled. The process was stalled because we didn't hear anything. And I believe it was probably in November, I saw a surveyor out there, and out in the park, and I asked him what was he doing, and he indicated that he was surveying for the upcoming project. So fast forward a number of months, during the construction, I saw a large structure outside of my fence, and I contacted the project manager and asked her if that was going to be installed on the pillar that was outside of my fence. I didn't know what that pillar was for, But I kind of put two and two together when I saw this great big structure. And she said, yes, it was going to be, was frankly horrified. And this was before it was installed. And I said, is there anything we can do about it? I'm not happy with this. I want to discuss it, and was basically told, no, it's going ahead, and I'm sorry you don't like the change. Okay. Okay, I am hearing impaired. I don't know if the other two folks, I didn't catch everything that they said, but we would like to discuss this further with you. There's other information that I think you should be made aware of. So that's what we would like to discuss this with you
Okay.
further.
Thank you for your presentation. We do appreciate that. Is there any member of council with any questions for our presenter? Councilor McCobb-Swain.
I was just gonna, do we need to make a motion to move back into meeting procedural bylaw, or does that satisfy the temporary? We're good?
Thank you. Councilor McCook, you have a question for the presenter?
Thanks, Brenda. Can you just clarify how you had voiced your concerns? Was it via email or was it via the portal or?
The original concern.
Yeah.
In July or June of 2020 was, as we were requested to put them in on the website or the portal or whatever you want to call it. And all of our neighbors did.
Okay.
There was 5 or 6 of us that did.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from council for our presenters? Again, thank you for your presentation. I'm glad we could accommodate you ladies also to present this evening. So thank you very much. And we'll move on to our meeting. Thank you very much. We will continue with our agenda. If you could, Ms. Winter, invite our presenters on the library, and thank you for their patience. Thank you again for coming.
Hello, are we up and going? Can I dive in?
Yes, thank you for your patience. I apologize for the slight delay, but you will have the floor. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. Thank you so much, Mayor. So hello to council. First, I just want to congratulate all of you on your election. I know the library board and I are very much looking forward to working with you guys over the next 4 years. For those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Laura Winton and I'm the director of the Beaumont Library. I'm very sorry that I'm not there in person today. I was planning to be, but my 2-year-old brought home another daycare cold. So I'm at home trying to make sure nobody else catches this misery. But I am here today with Graham Matichuk, who is our project coordinator, and Richard Isaac, our lead architect, both from Reimagine Architects. And we're here to present the schematic design we've been working on for the past year to renovate and expand the Beaumont Library. So I'm going to start by providing a bit of an overview of the project, including some history on the library and the expansion. I know some of you have heard this pitch from me before, but I know we have some new faces, so I want to make sure everybody has the same information. So the Beaumont has had a library since 1978, and the library has had a few different homes over the years. We've moved into new, larger spaces as the community grew and expanded. And in 2004, the library landed in our current building. It was the first purpose-built library building, and it's right next door to where you guys are tonight. The existing library is 8,488 square feet, and it was built to serve the Beaumont population at the time of construction, and that population was 7,807 people. So we all know that Beaumont has grown just a little bit since then. It's actually more than doubled in size. And the Government of Alberta publishes a best practices document for public library services that provides collection, facility, staffing, and service guidelines based on population size. And in the areas of staffing, collections, and space, the Beaumont Library is lagging well below GOA standards, even at essential levels. So we're just over half the square footage we should be, and we're just under 20,000 items short of meeting essential standards for collection size. So while our spaces and collections haven't grown in quite a while, our key performance indicators show that the demand for library services does continue to grow. So programming is in very high demand at the library, with in-person programs always full with wait lists. Our library visits have grown steadily year over year. And though a lot of libraries saw declines in physical borrowing statistics pre-pandemic, we've actually seen our physical borrowing stats continue to grow despite the fact that our collection size hasn't changed. We've been feeling the space crunch for quite a while, and our first step towards expanding the space came in 2017 when we contracted with Manask Isaac Architects to conduct a feasibility study investigating expansion options. And that study revealed that expanding the library in the current location was the best option to meet community needs, and it was also the most cost-effective option. And there's ample land on our current site to do that expansion. So in 2021, with capital funding of $150,000, the library contracted with Reimagine Architects to design the library renovation and expansion on the current site. And so the work we're presenting tonight is the result of that project. So we started design work in June of 2021, and our first step was engagement. During the pre-design phase of the project, we conducted a community survey and hosted community pop-up boards to gather information about what a dream library looked like for our community members. And we also held staff workshops to bring in an operational and functional lens to the design process. As we moved into schematic design, we hosted conversations with Indigenous community members and Francophone community members to learn what we could do through design to ensure that the library felt welcoming. And then most recently, we brought the design to a virtual community town hall and gathered input on the layout and spaces we have planned. All the feedback that we've received through all that engagement has been incorporated into the design you're about to see, and it helped us put together our design vision that you can see on the slide here, and it's also in the report. So I'm going to pass it over to Graham and Richard now, and they're going to tell you the story behind this design.
Hi, if you can flip to the next slide, please. So our design was heavily influenced by what we called Beaumont character. These two sketches are from the Beaumont history book and represent the landscape and some of the architecture within that landscape that help represent Beaumont. Next, please. This is a sampling of some buildings that inspired the story of this building. So we have the St. Vital Parish, the well-known church atop the hill, the existing Beaumont Library that we are expanding from, and a number of residences in and around Beaumont that were built by French settlers. We were also influenced by the Beaumont Urban Design Guidelines, which our firm worked on a few years ago, including some key elements of steep gable roofs, dormer windows, the municipal colors, and importantly, embracing the beautiful view down the hill. Next, please.
And for us, this is Richard Isaac here. For us, the placing of the existing library on the beautiful hill was an important factor for us. It's really important when one enters Beaumont and gets towards the center. It's really the attractive viewpoint. Next. We took the existing library as the basic form that we continue to use for the additions in the other two areas. And when we had the engagement with, for example, with the First Nations people, the idea that it was a trapper's tent could be seen from when one was inside the framed building, and then also it's driven partially by French homes. And so the three elements together form a complete unit. Next. So that's what we envisage for the library. On the right is the present stuccoed library with the curved window, and we've added two new elements that are interpretations of that or variations on that same theme. We've kept the same roof material that the existing library has, and we've added wood as a finish to the exterior. Next, please. Because we feel that one should not forget. I mean, if one's designing a building in summer, which we often do, and forgets that there is a winter, so we have to remind ourselves that there's a winter. And so it's important when we have snow, like we have now, that we have a building which has a warm appearance. Next, and back to Graham.
So as you saw a glimpse of, there's a few materials that we wanted to highlight in the design as we start to zoom in. The four main materials include the wood cladding on the addition, which helps complement and support the beautiful landscape of the area. Continuing the green roof, which is suggestive of the grassy hill on which the library sits. Bringing in some more modern interpretations of glass or glazing along the walls, which also supports the connection to the view down the hill. And maintaining some of the stucco on the existing library, which is a beloved building in Beaumont. Next, please. So these renders that we had just saw, this just shows the application of them with the green roof, the wood siding, and the stucco. Next, please. This diagram is another aerial view looking kind of above the parking lot. So the darker green highlights the existing library, and the addition is highlighted in lighter green just to the north. Next, please. These are just some technical diagrams that support how we oriented the building. Next, please. And highlighting some of the essential views. What came up again and again in the engagement was the beauty of the site. Next, please. You can go to the next slide, please. And next. So this is bringing into the floor plan. A bit more details included in the report, but the addition is located to wrap the existing library and connect those two separate wings and expand off of that. Next, please. The program's balance between administrative or staff spaces, some meeting spaces, which again came up in community engagement, and more space for stacks and circulation of items. Next. The noise gradient also balances some community concerns about the current noise levels in the library. Next. And you can just fly through these. We just wanted to show a snapshot of how the interior is developing and how we've embraced the view down the hill and created a version of the library that supports the existing library's beauty.
All right, thanks so much, Graham and Richard. They got to do the fun part. Now I get to talk about the less fun part, how much it's all going to cost. So you have this in your report, and I've separated costs into two categories. So we have, first of all, the construction costs. These were prepared by Reimagine, and this is a Class C cost estimate. Of course, once we build the building, we're going to also have to fill the building with stuff. So I've prepared an estimate of the furniture, fixture, equipment, and collection costs. And with those two costs combined, it brings the current total estimated cost to build and outfit the design you saw today to $8,390,370. But the library is not expecting the city to shoulder those costs all on their own. The library will be launching a capital campaign in 2022 to raise funds towards the FF&E and construction costs. And our target fundraising goal right now is $2 million. There are also grants available. The big one is the CFEP, the Community Facility Enhancement Program grant, which is a cost matching grant up to $1 million. So we'd be certainly applying for that. And once we take into mind those contributions, our current estimate of probable cost to the city is $5,600,370. So what are the next steps? We will complete the design phase of the project in February 2022. And the next step after that is to obtain construction documents and a Canadian Institute of Quality Surveyors cost estimate for the project. Once we have condocs and the CIQS estimate, we would be ready to go to tender whenever funding from the city is available. We're hoping that would be sometime between 2023 and 2025. So our ask today is not to fund the whole project, but for funding in the amount of $210,000 in 2022 to move to phase 2 and get construction documents and CIQS cost estimate. I know you guys will be considering this ask during budget deliberations next week, and I will be present and available to answer questions on that ask at that time, but we can also answer anything you have for us today. So that's our presentation. Thank you guys so much. And we're all eager to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Whitten, and gentlemen, thank you for your presentation this evening. Very informative and quite succinct, given how many pages there were. So we do appreciate that as well. And very informative, hit the high points, which is very much important to our council this evening. I'll open up to the floor for questions from council, starting with Councillor Miller. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura, and all others for the presentation. I really love seeing it come together and what you guys are proposing there. I just have a question on the history and rationale section. The 2015 to 2019 library visits statistics, you have the chart showing the increase in the traffic, and I just didn't see the sources cited as to where that came from. So that's my question, is if you could provide that.
Yes, so this is internal data that we gather every year. We're looking into getting more refined data on this with a gate counting system. We don't have it yet, but we've budgeted for it in 2022. So the data that you see in front of you for visits, that's based on sampling that we do. We choose 3 weeks throughout the year spaced out, and we actually count the number of people that come in the building. We tally those up, we come up with an average, and then we multiply it over the year.
Okay, thank you so much, Laura, for that explanation.
Thank you. Next, we have Councillor McCook. You have the floor.
Thank you. Definitely appreciate the presentation. I also really love that the library will honor both the Indigenous and the Francophone life in the area. And I appreciate you providing the number of users and demonstrating the growth the library has seen. I think that's really important. We don't always see that. So I think it's important to highlight that it is being used quite significantly. I just have a couple questions. How much additional programming would you be able to accommodate in the new space, as well as how much more staff will you require to accommodate this additional programming?
Yeah, so it's a great question. The expansion does add 2 potential separate spaces for programming, enclosed spaces. So there's a maker space that you'll see in the plans. We've put a movable wall in there so that it could be open when we're not programming in there, so people can come in and use it. But we could also use that as an additional programming space. We retain our main programming space. We also have a conference room. So if we were doing things like our language programming and things like that, we could potentially host those in the conference room. And then we're also looking at adding landscaped outdoor spaces that could accommodate programming. So we have a ton of extra space to add programming. Staffing will certainly be the issue. So my hope is that we would slowly over time grow our FTE by about 1.0 in the programming area, which would allow us to double up programming and make sure that we're meeting that need.
Perfect, thank you. My next question was on the makerspace. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that will be? It sounds great, but I just want to understand.
Yeah, so makerspaces are becoming more and more standard in libraries. Makerspaces can be a little bit of anything you want it to be. So if any of you have visited the downtown Stanley Milner Library makerspace that EPL has, it's a massive expansive space that includes 3D printers and a fabrication lab, sewing machines, a book printer, all sorts of different things. We wouldn't be looking to go quite that big. But the nice part about a makerspace is that it can be really customized to your community. So part of my plans for early 2022 is to do some engagement with the youth center and to learn a little bit more about what Beaumont specifically would like to see in their makerspace. We've heard from a few different community groups already that things like sewing machines would be a big hit, potentially a sound recording lab. So that will start to come into shape and into focus, but the answer really is whatever we want it to be.
Thank you. And then, so to roll off of that again as well, I noticed your budget for your tech and equipment. Are you sure you have enough budgeted there?
Well, I'm gonna call the cost estimate for that on my end also a Class C cost estimate. So as we start to learn more about what the community is going to want to see in that space, that number might be adjusted.
And then I noticed you incorporated a lot of sustainable initiatives into the design, which I really appreciate. Did you guys consider or look into solar panels at all? I know with the metal roof and stuff, that's probably not.
I'll pass that one over to Graham and Richard.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think Richard could add to this as well, but we've been adding those to existing building in a number of projects over recent years. And we've also been working on assisting clients with their grant applications for those solar panel projects. So at this stage, just in schematic design, we hadn't dived into the detail of solar panels, but it's something we would love to consider in design development and construction documents.
Certainly on the south-facing sloped roofs, we would be able to do it on the two new wings, so to speak, but the original library, we'd have to check on the structure of the roof to see if it could take the additional load. But that would certainly be something we'd love to be able to add to the project.
Thank you for clarifying. And you could do it on the metal roof?
Yes.
Okay.
There are ways of doing it on all kinds of roofs these days. You can actually do it on the wall, except it gets in the way of windows, but we've done buildings where the vertical surfaces of walls facing south are used for photovoltaic.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's it. Thank you, Mary Dana.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Monkoff-Swain, you have the floor for your questions, please.
Thank you, Mayor Danilak. Laura, thanks for the presentation. Very, very exciting stuff. This is such an important space for our community. So thank you for continuing to push this and championing it on your end. Councillor McCook recognized it as well, but just a very deliberate engagement that I wanted to recognize, particularly with the Indigenous communities. And I didn't expect anything less, but thank you for that. You acknowledge that you'll be coming back as part of the traditional budget workshop discussions, and I know you had an ask today, but my preference is to discuss those matters. Obviously, the $210,000 is unfunded right now in that budget process, and we need to go through and look at that as a whole before we get into any details on that. I had a couple of questions on the finance side, though, particularly around the capital funding campaign. So, you've got a project here, roughly 9 million. You're looking at raising over a third here, either through the grants. I understand the $1 million grant piece, you covered that well, but the 2 million, I'm just curious about what that capital fundraising thing is. Like what we often hear a lot of, and not to put you in the same bucket as a user group, but we often hear, groups come to us, oh, we'll be able to get all these grants, it'll be great. I mean, ultimately as council, we need to approve a final number. Anything else is gravy on top of that. So I wonder if you could just explain that $2 million piece. How did you land on that number? What does that entail? Where would you get that funding from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the library, we recognize that we don't have the resources to run a major capital funding campaign all on our own. So we have plans in 2022 to actually put out an RFP and hire a capital campaign consultant to help us work through this. So I've said 2 million as a target right now. I honestly took that just looking at other libraries and who have run capital campaigns recently and what their targets were and what their ultimate fundraising ended up looking like. That's where I came up with that number, looking at the size of the Beaumont community and comparing it to comparables. Once we bring on board that capital campaign consultant, we'll be taking a really close, hard look at that number and seeing what is feasible with their advice and with their expertise. So that could change and evolve. And I recognize that, it's a little loose right now, but by the time we come to you guys for funding for construction, we will have a very firm target in mind.
Great, thank you. And I know it's a little bit different, just from a sponsorship package, but we did look at something very similar for the rec center, and we had all these great high hopes, and we're getting there, but nowhere where we would like to be in terms of sponsorship. So there's a lot of work done, and I'm sure you're familiar with, the policy that we have around sponsorships and all that sort of stuff. So I just want to make sure that connection is there. The next question I had was just around the parking capacity. I'm just curious if you guys, how much detail you kind of went and looked at that. Clearly, you come in here, well, not every day, but most days you come in here, Laura, and you got City Hall right here, and with this expansion, do we anticipate an additional parking ask as part of this?
Yeah, so we do know that with this expansion, there would be a need to expand parking, and I may pass it over to Graham and Richard because they know the details on exactly those numbers. So Graham, I'll let you speak to that.
So when we did a bit of a zoning analysis, we found that an estimated 18 parking stalls would be required based on the area and the use of the space. And we actually have a meeting with some city representatives on the 2nd of December to discuss in a bit more detail about the city's current plans for that parking lot and when upgrades are happening, just to try to coordinate with when the city will be making adjustments to that and when the library will need adjustments to it. Our civil engineer has also workshopped 2 different options for how that parking lot might be expanded. But in our schematic design, because the details of how that might be coordinated with the city are still in motion, we haven't shown the parking expansion in that part.
Great, thank you. And just to confirm what I heard, and apologies if it was in the package, but any potential parking expansion is not included in that 8 and change number that you've got. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the last, and just to be clear, when I say and change, I know it's a significant amount of money. The last thing for me is, we struck up a committee to look at a performing arts facility, and I'm curious if this expansion, now this is obviously a standalone project that you're looking at, but I'm just curious if the library has been engaged in that broader discussion around that performing arts center and whether the library expansion could be part of that. I'm just curious if you guys have been engaged on that.
Yeah, so we have been engaged on that. So Paul Suter is the project sponsor for this, the library expansion piece, and he's also the administration rep on that Performing Arts Center Council. So I have been in close contact with him, just keeping up to date on what's been happening with the Arts Council. I haven't been given any information that I'm told I can share, but we have been talking about and thinking about, is there opportunities for this to go together? From what I understand, it's looking more and more like that Performing Arts Center may not end up on the library space. So we've headed forward with this expansion as a standalone project, but again, keeping in touch with them and making sure that we're making adjustments as needed.
Could I add to that as well, please?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When we had our community engagement, we also had a number of members of the arts community attend. We did that on Zoom at the end of October. And some of them were talking about library spaces that they would also like to use for their arts communities. So that's been also part of the design. And when I was involved in our feasibility study in 2017 as well, when we held a separate workshop with the Beaumont Art Society, and we talked about what their plans were and what the library's plans were back 4 years ago now. So these discussions have been kind of happening side by side and together. And I know Laura is having meetings with the city on that as well.
Great, thank you. And I won't tip my hand on the budget discussions. All I'll say is, important for us to have a full picture of everything that's going on, potentially in and around this space. And glad that you guys are talking through that. You can appreciate there's a couple of large capital asks, demands of us in the next 5 years. So I just want to make sure that we're all aligned there. So great presentation and looking forward to seeing you in just over a week, Laura. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Councillor Barnhart. You have the floor for your question.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk, and thank you all of you that have put time and energy into bringing this to this place. I was on the library board when we first started down this road, and it's good to see it's progressed to where it has progressed. That being said, my specific questions have already been asked and answered. One was about the parking, and the other was about the arts and the combination of the two. I think the only potentially missing gap there is the 4 years that I wasn't directly involved. So how we exactly got here, it's a little bit hazy to me, because I remember conversations about needing a parkade and about how big it would have to be if the arts facility was part of it. And now I'm kind of feeling like that's not exactly, we haven't really landed on that. But I applaud the fact that you're moving ahead, because that a decision has to be made in order to raise the funds that you're looking for. So this does kind of push it forward. I'm not sure if this is an appropriate question to ask you at this point, but maybe you would know from the library's position in terms of funding. I know when it comes to operating dollars, when you ask the city for those dollars, we essentially can't tell you where to put them. We can say yes or no, but we can't say where you should spend the dollars. Is that only operating, or does that also include capital? Do you know the answer to that, or do you want me to ask the administration that question?
Yeah, that might be a question for administration. I would think that if you're providing capital dollars for a specific project, we would need to spend them on that specific project, because we'd be obligated to come back to you and report on the progress that we told you we would make on that specific thing. But administration might have more of the legislative background.
May I do that, Mayor, and ask the administration if they could answer that question?
Yes, please go proceed. Mr. Blanco?
Through the mayor to Councillor Barnhart. I don't have much to add that wasn't already said. Laura nailed it in terms of, and yourself nailed it in terms of the operating dollars are a transfer to the library, and they can be spent however the library board deems, as well as the capital project. If council were to allocate capital funds to a capital project to the library, or as Laura said, they would be required to be spent on that capital project and then reported back on.
And just to clarify there, the decision is on how much we give to the library, not on what they do with it. Is that the correct answer?
Yes, that would be accurate.
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tessier. Oh, pardon me. I had the wrong button here. Councillor Tessier, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk, and thank you for the presentation. Most of the other councillors have covered all my questions. I just have one clarifying question. So you did say that you estimated the amount of people coming in the library during a 3-week period and then use that for the year. So about 60,000 people came through the library each in 2019. Is that correct?
Yeah, so basically what we do, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but basically what we do is we literally count everybody who comes through the door for a week, and then we do it for another week during a different sort of season of the year, and then during another week. And then we take those numbers, we average them, because we know it's going to fluctuate a little bit, to give us the average number of people that come through our doors in a week. And then we multiply that by the number of weeks, the number of open hours in the year. We are looking to refine this. We don't have a gate counter right now, but it is in our budget for 2022. So I'll have much more exact, precise numbers for you guys come next year.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Honestly, I've been to the library a decent amount of time, but I was shocked for that number. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Van Newkirk, you have the floor now for your question.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Daniluk. Through you to the presenter, Laura, thank you for coming tonight. And I would have to say I really enjoyed the last engagement session at the end of October. I did sneak in and try not to say very much and do a lot of listening, so it was very good. Couple of things. Just if you could speak to the vision for the outdoor programming space a little bit. I see it included, but I also see it included amongst some trees and stuff. I'm just wondering what the vision for that space might be.
So the outdoor programming space is something that we are still refining, and we'll continue to refine through design development. We got a lot of feedback on it during the community engagement town hall. The initial feedback, the initial plan was to really primarily use the small amphitheater that you see in the design package. That's closer to 50th Street. There was a lot of interest at the community town hall in a different space right off the program room that you also see in your report package. So that's a kind of new information that we got from that community town hall. We are still developing the plans, and you will see a more fleshed out version of that the next time this comes around to you. But ultimately, we recognize that we're on this absolutely beautiful site. As COVID has hit us and we've had to be creative about programming, we've started using our outdoor space, I think, quite effectively for outdoor programming. And we're doing a ton of that outdoor programming right outside our current programming room, where you see that additional space. So what it can and could look like, definitely some outdoor seating. one of the current problems we have with that space is that there's not a lot of shade. So when when it's a plus 30 day in the middle of summer, all these poor mothers are out there with their babies sweating away. So adding some trees for some shade and making it just a more sheltered, more purpose-built space for programming. And Graham, I don't know if you have anything that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I think that nailed it. And the other part is that we recognize that, especially when we have Indigenous engagement sessions, we hear this a lot, that a building is not a silo of its own. So it's part of its landscape. And that's really important in how we connect the building to the landscape. So with the library already doing programming, connecting it with the outdoors and with the surrounding area, we want that to be kind of purpose-built, as Laura said, designed with this building, particularly as the building slopes down a hill. As it starts to slope down, the ground floor is a little bit farther from the grass. So wherever we can help mesh that connection and make the building feel closer to its environment, we want to push for that as well.
Yeah, thank you. And just building off that a little bit, a question for the designers, Graham and Richard. Something that I had noticed in other communities, have you ever considered exterior accessible washrooms in this design? We have approved lighting for the toboggan hill, and it's used extensively in the wintertime. And in the summertime, the city endeavors to get washrooms around the community. But have you ever done that in a project where the washrooms it's kind of like a gas station, where you enter the washroom from the outside? Have you ever considered that idea or built that into a project before?
Yes, we have. Excuse me, Graham. Yes, we
I was
have.
going to say, Richard, go ahead. Yeah.
Just recently, we completed the entrance pavilion at the Botanic Gardens that used to be, had another name, I forget what it was, but out for the university. And they have washrooms which are accessible from the outside. They are barrier-free and accessible for the very reason that they want to be able to have the public be able to use washrooms when the main building was closed.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually know all about those. We've been there and used them. So a great example.
Good.
Second question.
Please proceed.
Just this one's more around revenue and making revenue on your own at the library. So just what are the available rental spaces in this design? Does this design afford you more space to rent? And in general, do you rent much?
Yeah, so this design affords us way more rental space. Currently, the only space that we have that's really rentable is our program room, and it is so booked solid with our own programming that we rarely have opportunities to rent it. So excuse me, in the new design, we'll also have a conference meeting room that is very specifically a space for community groups to rent and come in and have meetings. We will have our regular programming room that would still be available to rent for anybody who wanted to rent it when we aren't doing programs. And we'll also have that makerspace area. So again, when we're not doing programs, that would be a rentable space as well.
Yeah, so I don't imagine it's a groundbreaker in revenue, but it's still, it affords you to make some more revenue through that space. So yeah,
absolutely.
That's it for me, Mayor Dunlop. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That concludes round one of questions. I do see one more question, I think, coming from Councillor Miller. So, Councillor Miller, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Dunlop. I was just hoping, and this is probably a question more for the design team, and I heard it on the original presentation, so I just thought it might be beneficial to let or elaborate more to the rest of council and the public on the air handling units and the relocating of those from the ground floor to the roof and the benefits it's going to have just for interior space and safety reasons. Maybe just elaborate also on what currently happens with those air handling units and how those may be, play a factor into the safety of the community.
I wonder, Laura, would you be able to share the plan? That might help just visually.
Sure. Let me just find it here in my slides.
A bit hard to imagine an air handling unit area.
There we go.
So yes, this discussion we've had over a number of weeks. So the existing library has exterior air handling units, which you've probably seen with that green metal fence. There's a number of issues currently with people getting access to that area from the outside. And in the original RFP for that project, that was flagged as a concern where youth were climbing onto the roof from that point. They were kind of using it as an access point onto the roof. So in the design of the library, all of these blue spaces show you wrapping around that courtyard area. And where we see that new mechanical and electrical room and the teen nook, the storage room, and the purple washroom, those are the previous location of the air handling units. And what we were finding in the earlier stages of design was that we were creating a courtyard that was just for outdoor equipment, which was not really a best design practice in terms of access for maintenance and the snow and debris that would collect in that space. But we were also finding that it was taking up valuable programming space that the library could use for a dedicated teen space, for a dedicated additional washroom. And in our building condition assessment that we did in the summer with our engineers, we found that all of the ductwork would already have to be replaced for those air handling units because it's degraded over the years. Unfortunately, an interior application was used instead of exterior for sealing them. So because there was already this work happening, we found there were a lot of synergies in relocating these units to a new roof that would enclose more programming space and allow for one additional air handling unit to support the additional area the mechanical system is supplying. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Any further questions from council? I'm seeing no request to speak. So at this point, I'll thank our presenters on behalf of council. It's our job to receive this information, which I'll do on behalf of council. Gentlemen, Ms. Winton, thank you for presentation. Much appreciated. And enjoy your evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Excellent. Next order of business is 7A, Q3 Financial Quarterly Report. Mr. DeBlanco, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. Good evening to the mayor and council. Before you is the quarterly financial report to the third quarter of 2021. This report is intended to provide council with an interim financial update on budget versus actual and provide forecasts at the end of the year. For the municipal operating budget, which is summarized on page 32 of 40 of your agenda package. The budget did not factor for any adjustments such as reserve draws to offset impacts from the pandemic. Rather, the budget reflects a normal year of operations. And as you know, council approved a 0% tax increase for the 2021 budget year. Should there be any deficit incurred at the end of the year, a draw from the financial stabilization reserve may be required. So the pandemic has impacted the city's operating budget through service disruption for multiple service areas. These impacts have resulted in administration forecasting reduction of revenue of approximately 2.1 million. Recreation continues to be the area greatest affected, accounting for 1.9 million in reduced revenue. In order to minimize resulting deficits from this decreased revenue, administration has endeavored to reduce any unnecessary spending. These measures have resulted in a forecasted decrease of operating expenses of approximately 2.2 million. Once again, recreation has had the greatest reduction, forecasting 1.2 million less than budget. Based on revenue and expense forecasts provided by department directors, and when factoring in the forecasted change of 200,000 in net transfers, the consolidated result is a projected surplus of 200,000 approximately. This equates to approximately 0.5% of the municipal operating budget, and administration will recommend that any municipal operating surplus be transferred to an appropriate reserve at year end. An important point of note is that the city has utilized the remaining funds from the municipal operating support transfer to offset lost revenue in the first quarter of the year. This amount, which is approximately $400,000, has been included in government transfers line item and was required to be spent by the end of March. In absence of this transfer, administration would be forecasting a deficit of approximately 200,000. On to the utility operating budget, which is page 33. Utility revenue is forecasted to be 600,000 in excess of what was budgeted, driven by increased consumption at residential properties during the pandemic. An increasing to expenses of 800,000 is also driven directly by this increased consumption through purchase and processing of water and wastewater from their respective commissions. The result is a forecasted deficit in the utility operating budget of 200,000. This equates to approximately 2.4% of the utility budget. And once again, similarly, administration will be recommending that any deficit at year end be drawn from any deficit in the utility operating budget be drawn from the utility reserve. On to capital, which is page 34. As of September 30th, 55% of the approved capital budget has been spent. And based on forecasts provided by department directors, is projecting a savings of approximately 7% on the overall capital budget. One notable project that is forecasted to come in significantly less than budgeted is the Range Road 241 construction project. It's anticipated that there will be a forecasted savings of approximately $800,000. As this project is funded by offsite levy accounts, any unspent amount would remain in the roads offsite levy account for future offsite levy projects. On to reserve, which is page 35 of the agenda package. It is anticipated the municipal and utility operating budget will require the budgeted reserve draws of 1.1 million and approximately 100,000 respectively. From a capital reserve perspective, 2.1 million of a budgeted 2.6 million is forecasted to be required to fund capital projects. Any budgeted reserve funds not required for renewal projects would remain in their respective reserves. It's forecasted that the annual reserve allocation will be 400,000 less than budgeted, largely due to decreased interest on reserve balances from lowered interest rates for the city. The net result of these transfers is a closing reserve balance of approximately $400,000 higher than what was budgeted last year. Overall budget and financial impact: should the city incur any operating deficits, a draw from reserve would be required to balance these budgets. The most appropriate source of funding for a municipal operating and utility operating deficits would be the financial stabilization and utility reserves, respectively. And should the city yield a surplus at year end, administration would recommend to council the most appropriate reserve to transfer these surplus funds to. With that, administration's recommendation tonight is that the quarterly financial report is set out in attachment 1 be received for information. At this time, I'll turn the floor back over to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blanco. Are any questions from council members for our presenter this evening on the Q3 financial quarter report? Councillor Van Nieuwkerk, you have the floor, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Daniluk. 3 questions, 2 on reserve and 1 on a project.
Please.
Regarding the reserves, last term, the finance team spent a bunch of time doing a reserve study, and that study suggested, the optimal funded amounts that associate with each reserve. I would find it helpful if those amounts were included when we bring forward, reserve updates. Then that way we're able to look to say, okay, what's the optimal funded amount versus where we're at, to see if we're up or down based upon that. Is that something that would be feasible or possible, or is that a correct comparison to be making, as we look at these quarterlies and even the budget cycle?
Through the mayor to Councillor Van Nieuwkerk, excellent suggestion. The reason they may not be highlighted here in the document is there's a difference, depending on the reserve, there's going to be a different calculation for optimal balance. So in order to compare them apples to apples, you would want to compare them directly to what is stated in the reserve policy. So rather than having it specifically on this report, it might just be a note or an alternative attachment to have that available. But yes, excellent suggestion.
Yeah, thank you. And then consequently, I would expect that those numbers change as we grow. Is there a process in place to update that, or might we have to suggest that? I know that's not to this document, but it kind of goes in the same flow.
Once again, through the mayor to Councillor Van Nieuwkerk. So the reserve policy states mostly percentages based on other metrics, and there is a mechanism in the reserve policy for administration to recommend adjustments of the reserve balances to achieve these optimal balances. And that would be done as part of the year-end process. So similar to what was suggested in the report, if there was a surplus or a draw required from reserve due to either surplus or deficit, there would be either a transfer to or transfer from reserve. And part of that mechanism, if we see a reserve is either unfunded or grossly overfunded, we may recommend a shift from one reserve to the other.
So there's mechanisms in place to adjust that as need be.
That's correct.
Okay, cool. Next question. Range Road 241 project, you highlighted that, and that's great, and that's good news. The one question that's been asked of me a couple times, and I noticed myself, is there's a sign pounded in out there, this project funded by. And I'm just wondering if you're able to speak to, the advertising that's there on that sign and why it's there and who funds it and why and all of that good stuff.
Through the mayor to Councilor Van Uyck, I can't speak directly to the particular sign. I do know the project itself is funded by offsite levies. Offsite levies are collected from developers as part of the subdivision process and then put towards future growth projects in both utilities and roads.
Yeah, there's a physical sign out there, this project funded by blah, 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 and someone's names on it and stuff. So that's all I was wondering. I just didn't know, and I hadn't noticed it, so I drove by and had a look, so.
On that note, Councillor C.A. Schwartz has a comment as part of your question. CEO Schwartz.
Yeah, just quickly, I don't know the answer to that either, but I'll follow up on it and send a response to council.
Appreciate
I know
that.
what sign you're talking about. I drive by it every day.
Yeah, you betcha. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barnhart, you have the floor with some questions, please.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. Thank you, Mr. DeBlanco. Some pretty good budgeting and expenditures to the administration. You came pretty close, both, and I know it's still year end hasn't happened yet, but really, really close, and that's great. A couple of questions. One is the capital budget. When I was looking at that, and it said 55% of the budget has been spent. What I was wondering about, and it's curiosity. I appreciate if you don't have the answer. How does that relate to other years? Is that about what we usually do? Is 55%? I'm anticipating COVID has had impact on this, but I don't know which way. So if you can answer it, I'd like to know, how does that compare to other years in terms of percentage spent?
Sure. Through the mayor to Councillor Barnhart. So that number is the amount that's actually been paid out, right? So we're at Q3 and it's at 55%. And some of that will have to do with what we're being invoiced and billed by these projects, by the contractors for the individual projects. Some of that will have to do with timing of the individual projects. COVID obviously would be an impact to that. And then whatever the weather is and whether those projects have some sort of weather impact with them would have an impact on that, as well as whether the project as proposed and funded was anticipated to cross over a year. So if there's a project on here that was anticipated to be a 2 or 3 year project, we may have the entire budget on here, but not be, at 100% completion by the end of the year.
Okay, so it kind of rolls along. My second question is about utilities. And if I'm understanding this correctly, that the revenue came in higher, but then the expenses came even higher. So there was a slight deficit between those two. But that confused me a bit because I thought the revenue was kind of pegged on the actual cost. So and just looking at this and just anticipating some other questions down the road about, why would we have a surplus in utility and put it into reserve if we can charge our residents less for those utilities? Why wouldn't we do that? So if you could just clarify, am I reading that correctly?
So through the mayor to Councilor Barnhart, yes, you are reading that correctly. I want to make sure I understand the second part of your question in regards to surplus and
the fees are. I understand the fees are determined by some formula based on what the actual costs are, because your utilities are meant to be self-funded. In other words, we collect the revenue to pay for the utilities. And here we're talking about water, sewer, and garbage, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
So I'm just wondering does this lead to an increase in fees because we didn't have enough this year to cover the cost, or is it based on like previous years we had excess of fees, so we wouldn't be increasing them again? How do you determine that?
So the deficit that's shown on page 33 is attributable specifically to this year, although we do see a proposed increase in the proposed budget, which we'll get into in the next few weeks. What we found is that particularly on wastewater, the fee that we proposed might be slightly less than what was required to fund the operating expenses as well as the payments and commissions.
Okay, so some of the utilities are costing us more and others are, so and it's a moving.
To build on that, the numbers that were put forth in the proposed budget for 22 slightly adjust that depending on what the commissions are planning to charge for the upcoming years, we do receive projections from them and build those into factoring into how to calculate those rates.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions from council for Mr. DeBlanco on the Q3 quarterly report? Seeing none, we do require a motion to accept the report as information. Councilor Van Nieuwkerk, would you be prepared to make that motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd be pleased to move that the November 23rd, 2021 quarterly financial report as set out in attachment 1 be received for information. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any discussion on the motion before you? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Sorry, my mistake on the button there. Please vote now. Thank you. Motion was carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Council, at this point, I think I'll declare a 5-minute recess. We'll convene back at 7:20. All right, Council, we are live again on YouTube, so I'll call the meeting back to order. The next order of business is section 8. Sorry, oh yeah. All right, 7B, Councillor Tessier's notice of motion having to do with Subdivision Development Appeal Board membership composition. Councillor Tessier, you have the floor on your motion, please. Oh, now you have the floor. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. Yeah, just a little background on the motion to remove councillor from the SDAB. For the public and for people that don't know, it's obviously a tribunal and it's a decision-making board that we're a part of. A little history on that. A lot of communities have council on these type of boards because it's a smaller community, not a ton of volunteers, so council ends up on this. We've had a few presentations on governance from George Cuff and lawyer Mike Solomon, and they did advise us not to be on a board of this nature, just because if we're making a decision inside council chambers and then you're part of the subdivision appeal board and you can't really be unbiased in that conversation or that vote, I think it would be a better idea if the public were a part of that board and they get that chance to hear the public next to them and make that decision. Again, it is a tribunal, so it is a decision-making board. So that's kind of my statement. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tessier. I should be more clear. I was asking you to present your motion first, then speak to it. My mistake, not yours. I'll know better for the next time, but by 2025, I'll get it right, I'm sure. So, Council, this evening we're going to discuss this notice of motion, and we're just being asked to approve a report. We're not being asked today to discuss if council should or should not be part of the Subdivision Appeal Board. It's more a matter to get a report done. That's the only question before us tonight. So I will ask you to restrict your questions to the motion about the report as opposed to whether or not we should be part of the subdivision. That comes at a later time. So having said that, Councilman Newkirk, you have the floor first, followed by Councillor Barnhart.
Yeah, thank you. Just through you, Mayor, to, I guess, Councillor Tessier and perhaps administration. As I read this motion, I wonder if it might not need to be in 2 parts. And the reason is, the first part says that administration prepare a report on the advisability of eliminating councillors from the SDAB, period. And then the second part is, as well as a proposed bylaw. So is that the feasibility of a proposed bylaw as well? Or is it prepare the bylaw?
If I may assist, Councillor Tessier, I believe the intent from talking to Councillor Tessier previously was to provide a report to council, and with that report, an actual bylaw that should council wish to act upon the report and do a bylaw to withdraw from subdivision beyond at the same time rather than having separate meetings. That was the intent of the motion, the way it was written. Is that right, Councillor Tessier? I wanted to assist you with that. That's correct. Thank you very much. Does that answer your question, Councilman Newkirk?
It does, but it doesn't.
Please continue.
I guess I'll address my concern with that is that
Okay.
If we get a report back and, it's going to be information. We're going to have questions on that information. And if it turns out that we in fact don't decide to remove council from the SDAB, then administration is going to have put the time in already to prepare a bylaw for if we had. So, while I appreciate, lumping all that work together, I'm wondering about the cart before the horse, right? I'd like to read the report and the advice surrounding the change before I would direct administration to change a bylaw, right? It might be supposing the endpoint, but I don't know that the endpoint for me will be to remove councillors because I want to read that advice and ponder it first. So, that's my comment and concern with it. So thank you.
Okay, good consideration. Mr. Bujaya, do you have a comment on that from Councillor Van Newkirk?
Thank you, Mayor Danluck. Through you to Councillor Van Newkirk, I really appreciate that comment, and you are quite right. Oftentimes when administration drafts a bylaw, there is a pretty significant amount of work that goes into drafting of the bylaw. In this instance, the circumstance is a little bit different because we're talking about a very specific provision in one bylaw. So it's literally deleting one provision and replacing it with different wording. But to your point, normally it would be advisable to ask for a report before you asked for a proposed bylaw. If the report and proposed bylaw come back at the same time, council is under no obligation, of course, to give the bylaw readings. Council can receive it as receive the bylaws information and not act on it. But I do appreciate the comment, and I just wanted to provide some reassurance that in this case, it is a very easy amending bylaw.
Councillor Van Newkirk?
Yeah, thank you. Given that, I don't have a concern if we're just deleting a sentence, then, and it's not a major amount of work. So thank you.
I appreciate your thoughts about administration's workload. I'm sure they appreciate it too. Councillor Barnhart, you have the floor for a question, please.
Thank you, Mayor Danluck. And I suppose my question is to Councillor Tessier, as it's his motion. I'm wondering if what will be in that report. I see it's about the advisability of eliminating councillors. One of the questions I would have would be, I understand this is a quasi-judicial tribunal board. Are there other boards where the same reasoning could apply, that we might be in a conflict of interest or have an opinion that might sway the board or be showing some bias, and why this board? So I would just want the administration to include in that report, if it's okay with you, if that's where you're headed, how this would be different than other boards we sit on. The examples I would give you are things like the Housing Foundation, where we vote on requisitioning, for example, or the library board who we've just heard from. So what is it about a quasi-judicial, tribunal that it makes this different? And I guess that to me would be something I'd like to see in that report in order to make the decision. I don't know if that's a question as much as a comment, but.
Councillor Tessier, you wish to speak first, or CEO Schwartz? You want to comment first before Councillor Tessier jumps in? Yeah, go ahead. CEO
Just been
Schwartz, you have the
consulting
floor.
with Sandy. She's telling me that information will come back in the report.
Yes, I would assume so. Councillor Tessier, a follow-up?
Thanks, Mayor Daniluk, and to Councillor Barnhart. Great question. From what I understand, we approve the land use bylaw, and when residents come in here and they put an appeal forward and we've approved something, now you have to put yourself in a total unbiased position on that SDAB. And at that point, you'd be pretty much going against council if you don't vote the same. So that's kind of my perspective on how do you give an unbiased opinion that you just voted on. I don't know if that answers your question to a point, but that's my perspective.
Okay, council, having said that, we're getting kind of close to debating whether or not we should be part of the board. Inadvertently, we kind of got to that point. So I'm going to ask council to restrict any further questions to the report request as opposed to debating, not debating, but questioning whether we should be part of the board. And its own, that's the subsequent question for December 14th. Seeing no further questions from council, I will ask we vote on the motion, please. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, council. Next order of business would be 8A, councilor inquiries and reports. We do have the report back to council regarding Councillor Tessier's request on the service portal. Administration, do you wish to speak to this at all? CEO, oh, sorry, Ms. Winter.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. That is just an information item. There's no motion or anything needed on that item this evening.
Is my understanding. So is any, I will then ask council for any questions they may have, starting with Councillor Van Newkirk. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say your worship, but I'm going to say Mayor Daniluk. I'm trying to get better at that. Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. We had presenters in the open forum tonight, and there's a bunch of questions I think that have been collected. And I'm just wondering if administration, maybe Ms. Winter could put that up for us, kind of as a group collective inquiry here. And we'll just wait for that to go up, and then I'll read it out. And I did take the liberty of adding another bullet point. So. And once it's up, this will be something that, administration can, speak to what they can tonight, and perhaps, even provide a comment back to us, or, if council wanted to proceed in a different way, we could discuss that too. So.
Thank you. Just wait a moment. Thank you, Ms. Winter.
Yeah,
Councilor Newkirk.
so what's presented up there is just regarding the turf field construction, and just looking for some information. Please provide any available information on the following matters related to the construction of the turf field. When did the construction begin and end? What notice of construction was provided to the public and or adjacent landowners? Have the lights been used yet? Do the lights shine directly into residential properties? What measures have been put in place to mitigate the impact of the lights? And how were the concerns that were submitted to the city by the local residents factored into the project? So just looking to administration to see, the best way to proceed. Perhaps we would need to put a motion in to get this back as information, or else we could, hear some verbal updates tonight, and then maybe something back in the next minutes. Just look to the administration for some guidance on this group of questions. Thank you.
So before I get to that, I want to recognize the fact that this was a joint inquiry by Councilor Van Newkirk and Councilor Miller, who had some questions. We put it into one joint inquiry, which is something new for us to do. So always new in the first term of a new council, we're trying new things and doing different things. So with that note, CEO Schwartz, you have a comment? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll provide a quick comment, and then I'm sure Ms. Bujaya will correct me. Yeah, this is a new process, and the notion here is so that we can be more transparent and provide accurate information. So what I would suggest is, as an inquiry, doesn't need a motion. We will take this request for information, and we will do very similar to the previous one that you just saw, put it on paper and bring it back to council.
Thank you.
Is that right?
Does that answer your question, Councilor Van Newkirk? You're okay with that, Councilor Miller? You're okay with that joint inquiry?
Yes, I am definitely okay with that. The resident did clarify that the lights had not been turned on, so we may be able to take that one out. I did hear him say that, or we can leave it in just for information purposes, but just noted that.
CEO Schwartz?
I would suggest let's leave it in, because at some point they are going to be connected and lit up, and that could happen between now and next week. I'm not sure what the schedule is.
Thank you very much. Next councilor inquiry comes from Councilor Monkoff Swain. Sam, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. And more just a comment than anything. And here I go talking about procedure, so I get very nervous. But I'm just wondering, as these things come back, are these sort of things that can be on the consent agenda, and we can just kind of, put in a little asterisk next to them, so we can, they're there for information. I'm just curious just to kind of clean up this process, because it does look awkward. It looks like we're going to talk about it, and then Councillor Van Newkirk jumped into a whole different item. So just for you don't need to comment, but just a piece of advice.
I think, Councillor, that was my mistake for not being very clear that we were just going to finish off Councillor Tess notice of motion. Did not require a motion, and then I was going to a new topic. So I missed a step there in explaining what the next step was. So I'll clear it up for next time. Next, I have Councillor Van Newkirk. You have another inquiry. Please proceed.
Yeah, I turned my mic off. A different topic. I was just wondering if administration could provide an update on snow removal and how it's going. We see lots of trucks going. We see the grinder out grinding away, and things seem to be disappearing and roads seem to be opening up. So just a quick update on that. I've personally heard nothing but positive feedback. A couple concerns, but pretty good. So just wondering how it's going from administration's perspective. Thank you.
CEO Schwartz.
Thank you. Through Mayor Daniluk, I almost said your worship as well, to Councillor Van Newkirk and the rest of council. Well, thank you for the kind words. As you know, those are sometimes few and far between in that business. As no matter what you do, you never get it right. Crews continue to move snow out of the streets. I believe they're still on the mains. I saw them on 50th Street today as they windrow into the middle, get all the priorities ones done, and then get back and start actually physically removing the snow to our snow dump. And it was proved to be very successful last year, especially in the spring thaw. So I would definitely pass that your recognition along to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCook, you have an councillor inquiry. You have the floor, please.
I do. Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. I have two. Do you want me to
Yes,
say
please
them one
proceed.
after the other?
Thank you.
So I guess one of them is in regards to the snow clearing and hauling. Can you include any details on whether the city contracts dump trucks for this work? And does the work occur on the weekends? And then is there any sort of timeline in regards to removal? I know that we have like the snowpack type of timeline, but I don't know that residents necessarily understand that. I know I don't always. So maybe just some clarification on that.
CEO Schwartz.
Yeah, great question, and it'd be something really good that we could communicate through this medium, and then all the public will see it. So we will definitely pull that together into a one-pager and provide it to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then the other one is the rebranding of the Kobik Center. Can you provide any available information on the reason for the rebranding, rebranding it from Kobik to Seed, and then explain what, if any, public consultation was included as part of the rebrand, the cost, and how the costs were funded?
Certainly, again, through Mayor Daniluk to Councillor McCook and the rest of council, we will definitely pull that together for you and provide it in the council information package.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Tessier, you have the floor for your inquiry.
Thanks, Mayor Daniluk. It's more of a procedural question. So when a councillor inquiry comes back, are we able to ask questions at this time from the presentation, or how does that work when it gets sent back? Is this the time now, or?
Ms. Winter.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Councillor Tessier. When the item's coming back onto the agenda, it's just an information item. You would need to provide another councillor inquiry if you wanted more information on that item.
Okay, that does answer my question. More of, can I comment on the document without a question then? Okay, I think I did want to comment on this service Beaumont portal, because obviously we all get a lot of emails. I think it's a really valuable piece to send the city residents to. And I'm just gonna state that it is important that we find out that resolution time and when things do get rectified. I know, I think it was Joanne that presented it. Jennifer did a great job, and I know that's in the works. I just wanted to express that we're using that a lot, and I know residents are, and if they do get good feedback and understand they're being heard, it's going to make a big difference. Thanks.
CEO Schwartz, you have a comment on that?
Yeah, that's a great comment, Councillor Tessier. And if I recall in Jennifer's report, she talked about us needing another piece of software, something to connect up to identify the how quickly we're getting back and to screen for the parameters. Some are a 2-minute conversation, others are a major project. So we're in the second year, I think, of that, or the third year as it's evolving to getting better. But thanks for recognizing that. And I just want to make a comment on the process and the procedure. And I really enjoy the fact that people are paying attention to some of the changes we're putting in place, but it's going to be an evolutionary process. So please don't for a second think, oh no, am I breaking the rules? Because we're kind of pulling it together as we go. But I appreciate everybody's effort in trying. I'm learning too, and it's extremely valuable.
Ms. Winter.
Thank you, Mayor. I also just wanted to add that I've added Councillor Van Newkirk's question with regards to Range Road 241 regarding the project funding to a councillor inquiry. So administration will follow up in the same regards on how we do these councillor inquiries.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Are there any further councillor inquiries this evening? Before I move on to the next order of business. Seeing none, thank you. We move on to the next order of business. CEO update. Mr. Schwartz, you have the floor.
Yes, just very quickly, I guess the number one thing in the news is the vaccinations for the 5 to 11. The province had a news release this afternoon. There's also updated information on the website. The actual appointments are being scheduled for November 26th and on. However, you can register your 5 to 11-year-old right now on the portal. They said they've got about 43,000 people already done so, and that's the Alberta government website that I'm talking about, ab.ca. //vaccine. So any child from 5 to 11 can register. There's 120 clinics across the province that are going to be providing the vaccinations, and there's also 4 pharmacies. I'm not sure where, but in locations that don't have the clinics. They're also making creating special sites for First Nations communities, likely their public health offices. They've also determined that the minimum time between doses is 8 weeks. And I know I'm telling this to the converted and to the folks who know this information, but I just wanted to help the province get this out across to the rest of our public here in Beaumont. We have extremely high uptake, well into the 90% of eligible people are vaccinated. Currently in Beaumont, we've got our active cases, there's 33. But of course, across the province, the numbers on the hospitalizations are certainly trending downward. And, personally, this 5 to 11 is huge. And I think it's going to make a big difference in Alberta and make things safer in our schools. I think that's all I needed to add at this point in time.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Before we go into the next order of business, I'll just do a couple of mayoral comments if I could. Just wanted to congratulate and thank council for attending the AUMA conference this past week. I was pleasantly surprised and pleased at how many other municipalities came up to me and said, "You're the mayor of Beaumont. You guys are doing really cool things at the 10G, the innovation park." And I was very proud to show them pictures of the football field. They were surprised and amazed that Beaumont built such a fantastic facility. We have some concerns, obviously, from other people in the community, but it is still a fantastic facility. We had lots of great comments from other municipalities of how Beaumont has become very collaborative in the region. I think 3 or 4 years ago, we weren't quite viewed that well, but I think the previous council did a very good job of getting out there, including Mayor Stewart in this past, to go out there and promote Beaumont as a collaborative municipality with our neighbors. And we've accomplished that, I think, very well. So previous council did a great job. This current council, those who could attend, and you all did in some way or form, appreciate you taking the time from work and family to be able to attend that conference and promote Beaumont with our municipality neighbors. It's very important for us to do that, and we did a good job of that. So thank you for that. So with that, I will mention we're going to close session for a few minutes here. So prior to the motion, I'm going to read the information. Oh, pardon me. Sorry, I missed that. Pardon me. Thank you, Councillor Unkoff-Swain. Almost blew that. Are there any notice of motions from any councillors this evening before we go into closed session? Item 11 or item 10, seeing none, no notice of motion. Thank you very much. Item 11 is closed session. Before we ask the motion to go into closed session, I'll read the proclamation for that. As a reminder, under section 1973 of the MGA, council is prohibited from passing a resolution or bylaw during a closed session meeting. If there's a direction or a decision reached, council will revert back to an open meeting to the public, and the direction will be recorded in the public minutes. FOIP rules outlines the items that would allow a council to close a council meeting, which includes matter where a public disclosure could be harmful to third-party personal privacy, section 17 of the MGA. With that, I'll ask for a motion to go into closed session, please. Is there such a motion coming from council?
I can move that motion to go into closed session, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Unkoff-Swain. Appreciate that. All's in favor of the motion?